We're in Percy's, in the guest house at Yalumba, and it's a great place and it's got some great memories for me, Percy's, because we do a lot of Viognier breakfasts here. And I know some people have had breakfasts at Yalumba with Viognier. It's a great way to show Viognier off, you know, because one of the great things about Viognier is its importance in food matching and to go with food. So what I want to do is just take you through the group of Yalumba Viognier wines and talk a little bit about the Guigal La Dorienne at the end. But just to go through the difference in styles between these wines, the similarities and the differences. The citrus is more like a preserved lemon rather than perhaps a freshly cut lemon. So preserved lemons through the white flowers, jasmine, honeysuckle, orange blossoms, often you see a lot of that in there, and sometimes even the orange water, you know, like you use in cooking sometimes. And then of course the stone fruit spectrum, so apricots particularly, white peaches, nectarines, fresh, dried, sometimes into sort of the jam sort of spectrums. And then when Viognier gets beautifully complex and, you know, usually from some of the cooler sites in the Eden Valley, you start to see the ginger and those lovely sort of spices sort of coming through as well. So if you think about that as the flavours that might be in these wines, to me, when you go from Y series through Eden Valley to Virgilius, you're seeing that that sort of progression of flavours from the more, I don't want to say simple because Viognier is not a simple variety, but from the perhaps more easy to understand Y series, you know, through the pure essence of the Eden Valley Viognier flavours to the more complex and subtle Virgilius. They are typically low in acidity, which is one of the things that make them great food wines. But they have this beautiful textures. You know, the wild yeast that we use to do the fermentation of all of these wines, the indigenous yeast from the vineyards, help to create the layers and the textures and the flavours of these wines. So they've got width, they've got low acidity, but then they've got that beautiful natural phenolic that comes from the skins of the grapes that gives them a freshness. And I often hear people say, oh, this Viognier is fresher, it's got better acidity than I expected. And certainly these wines have got beautiful freshness, but that's not just acidity, that's actually from the structure and some of that lovely natural phenolics. It's got some similarities, if you like, to a normal white wine, so say to a Chardonnay. So your normal Chardonnay drinker might pick this up and have a look at it. Notice the Viognier glasses too, by the way. This is the glass that we designed about 8 years ago now, specifically for our Viognier wines. So Chardonnay drinker, pick up the Y series Viognier. Oh yes, I can see that. Have a bit of a taste. I can see, you know, it's got some freshness, it's got some richness, maybe like Chardonnay, but hey, wow, look at the extra flavour, look at the extra character this wine's got. And that's when you start to see some of those fragrances, some of those extra flavours and those beautiful aromas. And that's why the Y series does so well with people, because it's, you know, it's that crossover between, you know, something that's familiar, but something that's got that extra character and extra flavour that makes it worth persevering with. So that's Y series. And I think, you know, to me the flavours of that are definitely apricots, but, you know, with that orange blossom, that honeysuckle that goes on top of it. No oak influence in the Y series Viognier, so it's purely about the fruit, the wild yeast, and, you know, and what those characters do when they work together. So this is the essence of Viognier as far as Yalumba goes. So if you want to show somebody what Viognier flavour and palate weight and texture means to Yalumba, this is the wine. Sits there in the glass, this is me, you know, this is what Yalumba thinks Viognier is all about. It's apricots, it's white peaches, it's got some ginger, it's all open. When you pour this wine, it's absolutely ready to go. And it is this is probably the wine that the world knows us most for in terms of, you know, Viognier expression. And it is just, you know, it's everything Viognier wants to be in the glass there. On the palate, you're really starting to see that lovely sort of lusciousness that Viognier can have. One of the other comments I often hear is, oh, I like this because it's sweet. And of course, there's no sugar in these wines. They're not sugar sweet, but it's that opulence and that beautiful palate texture and weight that these wines have, which comes from the variety. It's Viognier doing that, nothing that we're really doing as a winemaker to give that character. This wine appeals to people that don't like, you know, wines like Sauvignon Blancs or Riesling with really high acidity. They want something softer. They want something that's more mouthfilling and rich. The other thing about these wines, which is interesting, is if you close your eyes and taste these wines and think of red wines, sometimes texturally and flavour-wise, you know, they're quite red wine-like. And that's one of the things that makes them, you know, such a good pairing when you start to come into red meats and things like that, because they've got the weight and they've got a red wineness about them. The Virgilius is our flagship white wine. It's not just our flagship Viognier, it's Yalumba's flagship white wine. And this is a serious wine. I mean, this wine is made, you know, we specifically choose barrels or barrels of wine when we're blending this, you know, that have got something that's sort of holding back. This is a wine that we want to evolve. We're not necessarily, you know, holding these wines back for a long time to release them, but for those people that want to sell a wine, this is a wine that people can quite comfortably sell. We look back to the 2003, which was the first wine under screw cap for us, for the Virgilius, and that wine is still, you know, beautiful and fresh. This wine will evolve in the glass too. So people that want the wine and to go on a journey with it through a meal, you know, this is the wine to do that with. You know, it will open up as it reacts with the air. If you want it to open up a bit more quickly, you can quite confidently decant this and serve it out of a decanter if you want. This is a 2007, and I don't know whether you can see, but the colour of this is, you know, it's considerably, you know, darker. And one of the reasons for that, of course, is this is sealed under a cork, so it's having some oxidative characters, you know, coming into that as well. I've always, you know, really enjoyed this wine, although it's a bit out there in terms of style. There's a lot of new oak in this wine, whereas we don't use any new oak in the Yalumba styles, because for us, for our vineyards and the fruit characters, you know, new oak just doesn't fit the style. But somehow it kind of works with this wine, and you know, again, particularly with food, those characters come out of the Condrieu as you're combining it with other flavours. Perhaps the difference that I've always seen with this wine is that there's more of that perfume, more of that eau de cologne character that comes out of Condrieu than we see in young Viogniers out of the Eden Valley and South Australia.